She lent her last $10 to a stranger at the train station, not knowing he was a millionaire who'd come back to change her life. The train station was almost deserted, cloaked in the gray mist of a cold March rain. Puddles formed in the cracks of the platform, and the sky seemed to press down heavier with each passing second. Emily pulled her coat tighter around her thin frame, her fingers red from the cold. The job interview she was heading to felt like a threadbare hope, but it was all she had left. Her eyes darted to the schedule board, then to the crumpled ticket in her hand. She had just enough time. Then came the voice. "Excuse me." The words were soft, hesitant. She turned, startled. A man stood just a few feet away, rain soaking into the shoulders of his thin jacket. His beard was overgrown, his hair stuck to his forehead, and his eyes, blue, tired, almost apologetic, looked straight into hers. "I'm sorry," he said again, shivering. I had my wallet stolen. I just need $10 for a ticket home. I swear I'll pay you back if you can trust me. Please." Emily blinked. For a moment, neither of them moved. The only sound was the distant hum of an approaching train and the steady patter of rain on the metal roof. $10. That was all she had left. In her pocket was a single crumpled bill, the last of what remained after paying for her ticket and a cup of instant coffee. $10 she was saving for a small meal after the interview. $10 standing between her and total emptiness. She could walk away. She should walk away. But she didn't. Instead, she took a better look at him. His lips were trembling, his hands red with cold. But it wasn't just his appearance. It was something in his eyes. There was no aggression, no manipulation, just exhaustion, sadness, maybe even a trace of shame. Emily hesitated, fingers curling around the bill in her coat pocket. "Do you have anyone you can call?" she asked. He shook his head. "Phone's dead. I tried asking others. No one wanted to talk. And how do I know you're not lying?" She pressed wary. "You don't," he admitted. "But I swear. I just want to get home." She should have walked away. But something in her, maybe something that still held on to the version of herself from before her mother died, before everything fell apart, whispered, "Help him." Without a word, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the bill. Her hand hovered in the air for a moment. Her heart pounding. This was insane, completely irrational. She looked at him again, then slowly extended her hand. "I don't know why," she said quietly. "But I believe you." He stared at her hand as if unsure it was real. Then he reached out almost reverently and took the bill. "I promise I'll pay you back," he said, voice cracking. Emily managed a small smile. "Just get home safe." He opened his mouth as if to say more, but then the train pulled in, hissing as it stopped. The man nodded, turned quickly, and disappeared into the crowd boarding the train. Within seconds, he was gone. Emily stood still, the damp wind brushing past her face, her stomach churned with uncertainty. That was it. Her last $10 gone. She didn't even know his name. The loudspeaker called out the next departure. She checked the time again. Her train was next, her chance, maybe her last. She climbed aboard, water dripping from her coat sleeves, and sank into a window seat. The rain blurred the glass as the platform faded behind her. She didn't know it yet, but that simple act of kindness, giving away her last $10, was the moment her life began to change. The morning after the train ride, Emily stood outside the office building where her interview was scheduled, heart pounding and hair still damp from the drizzle. Her stomach rumbled, empty. She had skipped breakfast, not by choice, but because her wallet now held nothing but expired receipts and an old photo of her mother. She was 20 minutes late. The bus had required exact change, and she had none. She tried walking, cutting through unfamiliar streets, but the city was sprawling, indifferent. By the time she arrived, the receptionist gave her a tight, pitying smile. "I'm sorry, the interviewer had another meeting. You'll have to reschedule." Emily tried to explain. She even offered to wait, but the woman had already turned back to her computer. She walked out of the building, shoulders slumped, soaked socks squishing in her shoes. The wind cut through her coat like paper. For a long time, she just stood there on the sidewalk, staring at the people who passed, busy, warm, dry, a world that moved forward with or without her. By the time she made it back to her tiny rented room, a single bed, shared bathroom, and flickering hallway light, the landlord was waiting outside her door. "Rent was due 3 days ago, Emily." "I know. I'm trying to. You said that last week. I can't keep making exceptions. Just give me until Friday. I've got someone else who will take the room tomorrow." "I'm sorry." She didn't fight it. What would be the point? She packed the few things she had into a worn backpack, 2 changes of clothes, a cracked phone with no service, a dog-eared paperback her mother used to read to her. She didn't cry. Not yet. That night, she found a corner in the 24-hour public library downtown. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The air smelled like dust and old coffee, and the security guard gave her a weary glance when she curled up in a chair behind the non-fiction shelves. The next night, he asked her to leave. The benches in the park weren't soft. They were metal and cold and unforgiving. But the stars above were quiet, and the city, in its strange way, fell silent after midnight. She hugged her backpack to her chest and tried to disappear. Each day blurred into the next. She looked for work, but had no address to list, no phone number to be reached at. She spent her days wandering between libraries, shelters, and job centers. The word hope started to feel like a cruel joke. And yet sometimes in the middle of those long hungry afternoons, she would remember his face, the man at the train station, his voice, his eyes. That moment he had looked at her like she was the first person who had truly seen him. And for a second, she would wonder, had she been a fool? Was it stupid to give away her last $10? She had nothing now. Not a dollar, not a place to sleep, no plan, no family. And still there was a strange kind of peace that lived quietly inside that memory. She had helped someone, maybe even saved someone. She had done the right thing, not because she had to, but because something inside her told her it mattered. But that peace was small, and the cold was large. One rainy evening, as she sat on the edge of a park bench trying to dry her socks with the last of the sunlight, a group of teenagers passed by. One of them threw an empty soda can in her direction and laughed. "Get a job," he muttered under his breath. She didn't look up. That night, she returned to the library, but the doors were locked. It was a holiday. She wandered the streets until nearly midnight, then curled up in a bus shelter, shielded from the wind, but not the fear. That was the night she cried. Not loud, not with sobs, but with silent tears that ran down her cheeks and disappeared into the collar of her coat. She missed her mother's voice, her laugh, her warmth. She missed feeling safe, feeling known. Her stomach was empty, but the hollowness in her chest hurt more. When the sun rose the next morning, it found her still there. Eyes swollen, hair matted, heart bruised. She had hit bottom. There was nowhere lower to go, and still she was breathing. It was a Tuesday morning when Emily met her. The park was unusually quiet with only the occasional jogger cutting through the mist that still clung to the grass. Emily sat on her usual bench near the statue of a forgotten general, her knees drawn to her chest, her coat zipped all the way up, though it did little to block the cold that lived in her bones now. She hadn't eaten in almost 2 days. The ache in her stomach was dull, but constant. She'd grown used to it, like the steady hum of a bad memory you can't quite silence. Then she noticed the woman. She was old, maybe in her 70s, but her movements were graceful. A wool shawl was draped over her shoulders, and in her gloved hands was a small brown paper bag. She walked with purpose, but when she neared the bench, she stopped and looked at Emily. "You look hungry," the woman said softly. Emily blinked, unsure if she was being pied or judged. "I'm fine," she murmured automatically. The woman smiled, kind and gentle, and sat down beside her. She placed the paper bag on the bench between them and opened it slowly. "I bring extra every morning in case I run into someone who might need it." Inside was a sandwich, thick slices of bread, a little uneven, but fresh with ham and cheese, and a smear of mustard. Emily stared at it. "I can't take that," she whispered. "Why not?" the woman asked. "Is your pride bigger than your hunger?" Emily looked away, ashamed. The woman waited quietly, patiently. Finally, Emily took the sandwich. Her hands trembled as she unwrapped it. The first bite made her eyes sting. "Thank you," she said, barely getting the words out through the lump in her throat. The woman nodded. "There's a soup kitchen on Monroe Street, just a few blocks from here. They serve lunch, but they're always short on help. You look like someone who could use a warm place and a purpose." Emily looked at her. "You think they'd let me volunteer?" "Ask for Carol," the woman said, standing. "Tell her Ruth sent you." Then she walked away. Emily stared after her for a long time, then looked down at the half-eaten sandwich in her lap. Later that day, she found the soup kitchen. The building was modest, a faded brick exterior with a peeling sign that read, "Hope Table." Inside, the smell of vegetable soup and baked bread greeted her like an old friend. She asked for Carol. Carol turned out to be a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with rolled-up sleeves and a clipboard that seemed permanently attached to her hand. When Emily explained that Ruth had sent her, Carol's face softened. "Ruth has an eye for people who need a second chance," she said. "You willing to work?" Emily nodded quickly. "Then grab an apron." The first few hours were a blur of tasks. Chopping vegetables, wiping down tables, pouring soup into chipped bowls. Emily's hands worked without thinking, but her mind was alive. People came in, men and women of all ages, worn down by life, but still managing smiles, still saying thank you. One man told jokes while he waited for his meal. Another offered to help sweep after eating. A little girl with tangled hair handed Emily a drawing made from crayon and torn notebook paper. It was of a flower. By the end of the day, Emily's feet ached, but for the first time in weeks, she felt like herself again. Over the next few days, she kept coming back, not for food, though they always offered, but to help. She peeled potatoes, folded napkins, and learned the names of the regulars. She listened to stories that were full of pain, but also of resilience, of people who had lost everything and still showed up every day with hope in their eyes. One evening, after the last dish was dried, Carol handed her a small envelope. "Just a little stipend," she said. "You've earned it." Emily opened it. Later, $20. Enough for a bus pass. Maybe a few days of stability, but more than the money, it was the trust, the recognition, the feeling that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't invisible. She sat outside on the curb, watching the sun set behind the rooftops, turning the sky into shades of orange and gold. And in that moment, for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel like she was falling anymore. She was still poor, still uncertain, still alone in many ways. But she had found something, a sliver of light in the dark, and she held on to it with everything she had. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon at the soup kitchen. The lunch rush had just ended, and the air still held the scent of tomato stew and warm cornbread. Emily was wiping down the last of the tables, humming softly under her breath, when the bell above the door jingled. She looked up. A man had stepped inside. He wore a dark tailored coat, the kind you didn't often see in this part of town. His shoes were polished, his hair neatly combed back, but it wasn't the clothes that caught her attention. It was his face. Her heart skipped. There was something about his eyes, blue, calm, and oddly familiar. He looked around the room, not like someone lost, but like someone searching. And when his gaze landed on her, he froze just for a second. Then his lips parted in the faintest smile. Emily set the cloth down slowly, staring. It couldn't be, but it was. He walked toward her with steady steps, stopping just a few feet away. "Hello," he said, his voice warm, more confident than she remembered. Emily blinked. "Do I know you?" He tilted his head. That same half-smile still playing on his lips. "You do," he said. "Or at least you once trusted me when no one else would." And just like that, it clicked. The train station, the rain, the $10 bill. "You," her voice was barely a whisper. He nodded. "I was a mess that day. Wet, cold, and desperate. You gave me your last $10. Emily's mind spun. She looked at him again. Really looked. The scruffy stranger was gone. In his place stood someone polished, composed, like he belonged in a boardroom, not a soup kitchen. "I never got your name," she said softly. "David," he replied. "David Carter," she repeated the name silently, as if trying to anchor herself in reality. "I came back the next day," he continued. "But you were gone. I checked the station, the ticket counter. No one knew who you were. I didn't even know your name. I didn't think I'd ever see you again," she admitted. He smiled again, softer this time. "Neither did I, but I never forgot your face." Emily folded her arms across her apron, still stunned. "Why are you here?" "I was passing through the neighborhood and saw the sign. Thought I'd stop in. Something told me I should." She wasn't sure she believed that. No one just walked into a soup kitchen in this part of town on a whim. Not dressed like that. David looked around the room. "You work here?" "I volunteer," she said. "Helps me keep my head above water." He nodded thoughtfully. "You helped me when I had nothing. I'd like to return the favor." She shook her head slowly. "That's not why I gave you the money." "I know," he said. "That's exactly why I want to." There was a long silence. Then he stepped closer, reaching into his coat. He pulled out his wallet, then hesitated. "I brought this," he said, handing her a crisp $10 bill to pay you back. Emily stared at it, then laughed softly, not mockingly, just with disbelief. She took the bill, fingers brushing his. "Thank you," she said. He wasn't done. "And more than that," he added. "I'd like to take you to dinner sometime, or coffee at least. There's something about you I haven't forgotten." Emily looked down at the bill in her hand, then back at him. Everything about this moment felt surreal, impossible, like a scene from someone else's life. "You're really not who I thought you were," she murmured. He smiled. "No, I'm not." And suddenly, she realized something. Neither was she. They sat across from each other in a quiet corner of a nearby cafe, the kind with mismatched chairs and soft jazz playing in the background. Emily still wore her soup kitchen apron beneath her coat and her hands curled around the warm mug David had ordered for her. Chamomile tea with honey. She hadn't had anything this comforting in weeks. David stirred his coffee slowly, then looked at her. "You're probably wondering who I really am." She gave a small smile. "Well, yeah." He reached into his coat and pulled out a sleek black business card. He slid it across the table. Emily hesitated, then picked it up. "David Carter, CEO, Novus Park Technologies, founder, the Carter Foundation." She stared at it, blinking. "Novus Park? That's your company?" David nodded. "I started it 10 years ago. We build adaptive learning software and AI solutions for education. It took off faster than I ever imagined. Emily's mouth opened, then closed again. She had heard of Nova's Park. Everyone had. It had been on the news, praised for revolutionizing access to digital education in underfunded schools. She remembered reading about it once back when she still had a job and a couch to read on. But that day at the station. You were doing something stupid. He finished with a grin. I'd been working on a project for our nonprofit arm, the Carter Foundation. One of our initiatives is about understanding homelessness and building better systems to support people who fall through the cracks. I wanted to see for myself, really see it. So, I went undercover for a week. No wallet, no ID, just the clothes on my back. He leaned forward slightly. I planned everything except getting my pocket picked on the first day. Emily laughed under her breath. So, you were really stranded. I was, and everyone I approached either ignored me or brushed me off. He looked at her, his expression growing softer. Everyone except you. She felt a flush rise to her cheeks. You didn't know who I was. You didn't ask for anything in return. You gave me everything you had and then you just disappeared. That stuck with me. Emily looked down at the tea. I wasn't trying to make an impression. Honestly, I thought I was being naive. You weren't, he said firmly. You were human. You were kind. He paused for a moment, choosing his words. I've met people with money, power, and influence. But in that moment, you showed more integrity than most of them ever will. That's why I've been looking for you. I want to offer you something if you're open to it. Emily lifted her eyes. What kind of something? David leaned back in his chair, his voice steady. I want you to work with us. Not at Nova's Park. At the foundation, we have programs that help people like you once were young, struggling, overlooked. We fund community-led projects, micro-entrepreneurship, social innovation, and we need people with heart, people who get it. She blinked, stunned. But I don't have a degree. I don't even have a stable address. He smiled. We've hired people with MBAs and people who've lived in tents. What matters is your story, your resilience, your willingness to help others when you had nothing yourself. Emily sat back in her chair, overwhelmed. The weight of the past few weeks suddenly caught up to her. All the nights on benches, the hunger, the rejection, and now this. You really mean it? She whispered. I wouldn't be here if I didn't, she swallowed hard. What would I do? You'd start by learning, training. We'll get you settled somewhere safe with support. Then you'd work with one of our community teams, help shape programs eventually, maybe even lead one. For a long moment, Emily said nothing. The room seemed to fall away, leaving just the warmth of the tea in her hands and the quiet hope rising in her chest. I don't know what to say, she murmured. Say yes, he said with a small, hopeful smile. Let's change lives, starting with yours. She looked at him, at the stranger she'd once helped without knowing a thing about him, and now sitting before her like a door she never thought would open. And somewhere deep inside, something began to shift. A belief that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't meant to stay lost. She took a breath. Okay, she said. And in that moment, her life began to change. Emily's first day at the Carter Foundation felt like stepping into a different world, one she had only seen through glass before. The headquarters was nestled inside a renovated brick warehouse. Filled with light, laughter, and the buzz of collaboration. Young people bustled between desks and whiteboards, and walls were lined with stories, photos, and quotes from lives changed through the foundation's work. David introduced her to the team not as someone to be helped, but as someone bringing value. That alone changed everything. He didn't treat her like a charity case. He treated her like a peer, like someone with insight the world needed. Over the following weeks, Emily immersed herself in training. He learned about community planning, grant writing, social project design. She shadowed coordinators in the field, met with youth shelters, food banks, recovery centers. Slowly, the pieces of her confidence, long buried under doubt and fatigue, began to come back together. And then came the moment David handed her a slim folder. "Your own pilot project," he said. "Design something meaningful to you. We'll support it." Emily opened the folder and saw her proposal had already been typed up. A mobile soup kitchen, a van that could move between underserved areas, bringing hot meals and human connection directly to those in need, just like she had once been. The vision had come to her during one of her last shifts at Hope Table. She'd remembered the night sleeping on benches, the shame of walking into fixed location shelters, the fear of being seen, but what if help could come to them instead? David believed in it. So did the board. The Carter Foundation funded the prototype. They gave her a small team and they gave her trust. The first time she saw the finished van painted sky blue with Open Hands Project written in gentle lettering across the side. She stood in the parking lot and cried. Her first night running the van, she drove to a park she knew too well, where she had once slept beneath a cracked statue. That evening, she served over 100 meals. But more than food, she offered stories, hugs, names remembered. She listened. And as word spread, her program grew. In the quiet moments between planning routes and chopping vegetables, Emily found herself seeing David differently. Not just as the man from the train station or the CEO who had changed her life, but as someone with a quiet, unwavering kindness. He never boasted, never reminded her of her past. He just showed up with encouragement, with humor, with coffee when she was too tired to speak. Their connection deepened in soft, unspoken ways. A late walk after a community event, a shared laugh over a burned batch of cookies at the test kitchen. He listened like few ever had. She trusted him without even noticing she did. One Saturday afternoon, as Emily finished a community luncheon, she noticed a familiar figure seated on a bench beneath the trees. It was Ruth, the elderly woman who had given her a sandwich on one of her darkest days. Emily rushed over. "I've thought about you every day since. You saved me." Ruth smiled gently. "All I did was feed a hungry girl." They sat together, catching up the way long-lost friends do. And then Ruth chuckled, patting Emily's hand. "I hoped you'd find your way to David." Emily blinked. "Wait, you know him?" "I should," Ruth said with a playful glint in her eye. "He's my son." The world tilted slightly. "You sent me to Carol. You knew exactly what you were doing." Ruth nodded. "David told me about the girl who gave him $10 when he had nothing. I had to meet her. When I did, I saw what he saw. Someone with a heart too big to be ignored." Emily sat back, stunned. "All this time. It's funny, isn't it?" Ruth said, "how one small act of kindness can ripple into something bigger than either of you ever imagined." That night, Emily sat beside David on the foundation's rooftop garden, the city lights flickering below like distant stars. She told him everything about Ruth, about the sandwich, about the moment she realized their paths had been intertwined long before either of them knew. David listened, then reached for her hand. "I used to think fate was just coincidence. We gave meaning to," he said. "But meeting you, it changed that." Emily looked at him, really looked, and for the first time let herself believe in something bigger. That maybe her suffering had not been for nothing. That maybe every sleepless night, every loss, every tear had carried her here, to purpose, to love, to a future. And in that moment, everything connected. The rain-soaked train station, the sandwich in the park, the soup kitchen, the blue van rolling through forgotten streets. It had all been leading to this, to her becoming. The city was buzzing with the energy of early spring when David brought it up. They were walking through a community garden in the heart of downtown where the Open Hands Project had recently partnered with a local shelter to provide meals and job training. Children laughed as they chased each other between rows of sprouting vegetables. Volunteers chatted over wheelbarrows of soil. David had been quiet all afternoon, a certain thoughtfulness in his eyes. As they reached the far corner of the garden beneath the arching branches of a budding magnolia tree, he finally spoke. "Emily, I've been offered a new opportunity," he said gently. "We're opening a satellite office in New York. The foundation is expanding and they want someone to lead the urban outreach initiative." She looked at him, heart pausing mid-beat. "You?" He nodded. "They asked me to take it, but I told them I wouldn't go without making you the same offer." Her breath caught. "You want me to go with you?" "I do," he said. "To help lead the next phase of Open Hands. We'd be able to reach more people, build on everything you've started together." Emily didn't answer right away. She looked around the garden, the people, the sun dipping just behind the rooftops. Her gaze fell on a young woman helping an elderly man sort seed packets. Someone Emily had met during her second week volunteering when she herself was still unsure of where she belonged. This place, this city, it had held her through the worst of her life. It had watched her fall and then taught her how to rise. "I don't know," she said finally. "I love what we're building here. These people, they were the first to believe in me, to make space for me." David nodded, not with disappointment, but understanding. "I thought you might feel that way." "I'm not saying no," she added quickly. I feel like I'm supposed to keep sowing roots here a little longer. There's still work to do." "I know," he smiled, his voice soft. "That's why I admire you." They sat on a bench nearby, letting the quiet fill the space between their thoughts. "I guess this is the part where the road splits," Emily said. "Maybe," David replied. "But only geographically." She turned to him, eyes searching. "You think we can make that work?" "I think we already have," he said. "You and me. We're not just bound by location. We're bound by what we believe in, what we've been through. And we'll keep building in different cities maybe, but always together in some way." She smiled, a little sad, but deeply sure. "You're going to do amazing things there." "So are you," he said. Here they made a plan. David would move to New York in the fall. Emily would continue running the Open Hands project in the city they both loved. They'd stay connected through weekly calls, joint initiatives, visits, and late-night texts filled with updates and dreams. Their story wasn't ending. It was simply evolving. And as they stood beneath the blooming tree, the wind lifting petals into the air around them, Emily knew one thing with absolute clarity. She wasn't losing him. They were just planting seeds in different soil. 1 year later, the city had changed. Or maybe Emily had changed the way she saw it. The streets no longer felt like a maze of despair. They were filled with purpose, possibility, hope. The Open Hands project had grown into something far bigger than she ever imagined. With expanded routes, a network of volunteers, and a rotating kitchen team, the mobile units now served over 2,000 meals a week. But it wasn't just food they offered. It was dignity, conversation, human connection. The national press had caught wind of the program and last month she'd flown to Washington, D.C. to accept an award on behalf of the team, a national recognition for innovation in community outreach. As she stood at the podium, lights flashing and cameras clicking, she remembered the bench she once called home, the sandwich from a stranger, the $10 she thought she'd lost forever. Now she was the director of a full-scale homeless support center, a space with showers, job training, mental health services, and art therapy rooms. The same hands that had once shaken with fear now carried keys to a place where people could begin again. And still, every morning, she started her day just like before, at the kitchen, tying on an apron, greeting the early guests by name. On the anniversary of the Sense founding, the team organized a celebration. There were balloons, a banner that read 1 year of Open Hands and dozens of photos strung on a clothesline capturing moments of meals shared, lives changed, smiles earned. Emily arrived late, having met with city officials about expanding their grant support. She stepped into the hall, heart full, eyes scanning the room. Then she saw him, David. He was standing by the serving table, holding a bouquet of wild flowers and something else in his pocket. His eyes locked onto hers and suddenly the noise of the room faded away. He crossed the room slowly, smiling. He looked older, wiser, and more at home than she had ever seen him. "Hi," he said softly. She laughed through the sudden burn of tears. "You came back. I told you I would." The room quieted as if sensing something more than a reunion. David reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. But before opening it, he also pulled out a crisp $10 bill unfolded, untouched. "I've been carrying this with me," he said, "for a year. Not because I needed to pay you back, but because I needed to remember the moment that changed everything." He opened the box. Inside was a simple, elegant ring. "You gave me something no amount of money could buy. Faith. When I had nothing to show for myself. Let me spend the rest of my life proving you were right." The room held its breath. Emily stared at him, speechless. The tears fell freely now, and she didn't try to stop them. She thought of the girl she had been, lost, tired, clutching a crumpled bill in the rain. She thought of the man she had trusted, not knowing he'd become the one to rebuild her world. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." The applause erupted around them, but Emmeline didn't hear it. All she could feel was the warmth of his hand in hers, the thud of her heart, and the quiet truth that had carried her all this way. Later, as they stood beneath the string lights, watching the people they had helped dance and laugh and reclaim joy, Emily held the $10 bill in her hands one last time. She smiled. "A little kindness," she said aloud, "can be the beginning of a miracle." Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey of hope, kindness, and second chances. Emily's story is a powerful reminder that even the smallest act of compassion, a single $10 bill, can ripple through time and change lives in ways we never imagine. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories for more true-to-life tales that inspire, heal, and awaken the soul. We believe in the power of storytelling to bring light to the darkest corners, and you being here means the world to us. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and remember, your story matters, too.